Okay, I guess we can start. So, hello everyone. My name is Matt. I'm the CTO of Takeaway. And we have now Trivia from Tel Aviv, who is the employer branding specialist. Rob from Enschede team, who is the senior software developer. And David, also from Enschede, senior software developer of Takeaway. So we are so happy to have you here with us tonight, discussing about Java and more deeper stuff. So I will just give you a quick introduction about Takeaway. So on the tech side, we are about 400 engineers distributed in 4 different locations: Tel Aviv, Berlin, Enschede, which is Netherlands, and also Sofia. We are in the food delivery business, operating in more than 10 countries right now. Luckily, with the Corona situation, our business is one of the luckiest businesses, and we are doing fine. I'm hoping that you are also fine, happy, healthy with your families. It's quite difficult times we all are going through. We had meetups in Enschede, Berlin, and Tel Aviv in the past, where we were offering pizzas and beverages. This time it's unfortunately not possible, but hopefully next time when Corona is over, we will welcome you to our offices so we can have pizzas and beers together and get to know each other more. So I will leave the microphone to David to proceed with this presentation. So thanks a lot and enjoy.
Thank you very much to Matt. I'm very excited. Yeah, like Matt said, my name is David. I work in Enschede. I am a senior software developer, and in my experience, software developers don't really like being told how something works. Rather, they like being shown how to get something done. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to use Spring Cloud Stream and later on Junit5 to create 3 microservices and have them talk to each other. And these 3 microservices will be, it'll be a movie theme. So the demo producer here on the left will be a microservice that generates some movie data, very simple. The processors are going to do some filtering, some data manipulation, and the consumer is just going to print some stuff so that we can see the output of the entire system. For this, we're going to use Apache Kafka. Now, I expect most of you to have heard of or even used Apache Kafka in the past, or maybe RabbitMQ or ActiveMQ or one of the similar systems. For those of you who haven't heard about it, it's a message broker, as they call it. It usually just runs somewhere in your system, and any one service can say to Kafka, hey, I have a message for this topic, say, for example, a topic called movies. And once it does that, any other service which is listening to that topic, such as this demo processor, will receive this message and be able to process it and work with it. And then after that, we have another Kafka topic called good movies. The demo processor is going to put messages on that topic, and the demo consumer is going to read them. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it live. Now, I don't have that much time, so I'm going to be a little bit quick about it. I have Apache Kafka running in a Docker image in the background. Here's my IntelliJ, and we're going to create a new project. Now, I'm going to use the Spring IO initializer. You can use the website start.spring.io, but IntelliJ has it built into the editor, which is really nice. And we're going to go ahead and call this thing the demo producer. Set it to Java 11. We don't need to change any of the other things right now. And here we select our dependencies. That's kind of important. We need Spring Cloud messaging and then Spring Cloud Stream. That's the topic of the talk today, after all. And we want to have under messaging, there's Spring for Apache Kafka, because that's the message broker that we're going to use. Put it anywhere, don't really care. And we get our basic Maven setup. We have our source main Java resources. We have a test folder, and we have a pom.xml. And in the pom, we can see our dependencies. So you have here Spring Cloud Stream, Spring Cloud Stream binder Kafka, and Spring Kafka. Now, I do need to manually add a dependency to org.json. Yep, like this. Doesn't really matter which version. I don't know why it does not doesn't do that automatically. It's a little bit annoying, but it works. And then we have a demo producer application, so our Spring Boot application. And we want this application to put messages on Kafka. So we're going to define a bean, which is going to be a supplier. I'm going to go ahead and call it supplier bean. And this supplier bean will return any movie. Let's say Batman Begins. This supplier is the regular Java util function supplier introduced in Java 8. And that's it. That's all the business logic we need. I could run this now and it would work, but the topic that it would put these messages on would be derived from the name of the bean, which is not what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add one config property for this supplier bean. I'm going to call it Spring Cloud Stream Bindings supplier bean out 0. So the supplier bean has one out channel with index 0. I'm going to give it a destination, call it movies. Oops. So with this, we're telling Spring, make a Kafka topic called movies and put the messages there. I'm going to run it. And let's see if it connects properly. While it boosts, I just want to mention, if you have any questions, there's a question function in GoToWebinar. Just ask away. Maybe I'll answer them halfway in between. Maybe I'll answer them when I'm done or when Rob is done. But just ask away, and we'll try to answer them as much as we can. The producer is running. This is good. It doesn't produce any visible output yet, but that's okay. I'm going to make a new project. Again, with the Spring IO initializer. And we're going to go ahead and call this the demo processor. That's the one in the middle. Java 11 again. Spring Cloud Messaging, Cloud Stream. That's what we need. And for messaging, we want our Spring for Apache Kafka. We're using Spring Boot 2.3.0, by the way, which was released less than 2 weeks ago, I think. So the demo processor. Let's see. So we got the same thing. Again, we have our basic Maven setup, and we have our POM. Our POM has, again, exactly the same dependencies, also missing the auth.json, which we're going to add. There we go. We should refresh the dependencies. All right, and then we have our Spring Boot application again. Now we're going to make another bean here, but this won't be a supplier because this bean needs to read data, do something with it, and then output some other data. So it's going to be a function, which I'm going to go ahead and call processor bean. And for now, to keep it simple, we're going to just have it return string to uppercase. So again, this is a Java util function dot function. Super basic, and we're just going to uppercase whatever we get. No, wait, I'm running it, but I'm too fast because I need to set my topic again. My destination. So bindings, we have our processor bean with one input. The input that it does have has index 0. And the destination is movies, which means destination is a little bit tricky, but it now reads from a topic called movies. And we're going to give it an output topic, which is called good movies. So it will read from movies, output to good movies. Try again. One line overview of Spring Cloud Stream, please. That is an interesting question. Spring Cloud Stream, yeah, it has so many things, but the basis of what it does is to create destinations and connect them to channels. I know it gets very cryptic very quickly. But the basis is that you use it to connect either separate channels within a single application together or channels from different applications. I hope that answers your question. I know it's a little bit cryptic, but there's so much stuff in Spring Cloud Stream. The demo processor application. It's a good question. The processor is running. We're going to go ahead and create our consumer now because we want some actual output. I keep talking about how awesome everything is, but we haven't seen anything actually do something. So we're going to make a Spring Cloud Stream consumer. Yeah, that seems like a fine folder. And we have our basic Maven setup again. Again, add the auth.json dependency. I promise this is the last time. Auth.json dependency, click on this magic little button. You need to manually re-import the dependencies, otherwise it doesn't work. It's cumbersome. So we have our consumer bean, which I'm going to call consumer bean because I'm creative, which is just going to put stuff on system output line. I'm not even going to bother with a logging mechanism because I don't really need it right now. And that's our consumer. Again, we need to make sure that it listens to the correct correct topic. That's the in. Destination is good movies. And that should work. So I'm going to run it now. And what I really, really hope to see is Batman Begins multiple times in all caps. Yes. Excellent. So that was actually step one. We have now created in the span of, I don't know, 7 minutes, 3 microservices. They're not in Docker, but they are 3 separate Java processes communicating with each other over Apache Kafka. And really the beans and the config is all that you need to do. So what I want to focus on here is the fact that Spring really does everything it can to remove boilerplate, and it provides default for pretty much everything. Now, of course, in production, you wouldn't have Apache Kafka running on localhost, which is the default value. So in production, you need to put in a little bit more work. But if you're not, if in general, if you don't need to do something fancy, then the default works really well. Step 2, yes, I'm going to make it a little bit more interesting because right now we are passing strings around, which is just child's play. I'm going to make a new class. I'm going to call it movie. And the movie has 2 properties, a name and a rating. The rating will be something between 1 and 10. Now I need to generate some constructors, an empty one with both properties. So we have our constructors. I want some getters and setters. Yes, we have our getters and setters. I need equals hash code. Close your eyes, nobody needs to see that. Yes, good. And I want a toString as well, just to make it a little bit more visible. Okay, so we have our constructor, we have our getters and setters, we have a toString, equals, and a hash code. And a name and a rating. Now, normally, I know you would use Lombok for this or just write the whole thing in Kotlin, but we're keeping it bare bones right now. So we're sticking with this. Now, here, we want to actually return them. So I'm going to make a list of movies. Import everything. Yes, that seems fine. Import this, also fine. So let's say, yeah, Batman Begins, rated, I don't know, 7. We're gonna add, let's add a bad movie as well. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I hear that one's quite bad. Rated 2. Apologies to anybody who actually does like the movie, by the way. You're entitled to your own opinion. And a kids movie, like
yeah, you could do the Lego Batman 2 movie, David.
Lego Batman movie. Yes, thank you very much. I don't have kids.
It's in the theme.
Yeah, that's in the theme. What would you rate that movie, Rob?
I would give that a solid 8. It's a fun movie.
Solid 8. Okay, solid 8. Fun movie. Okay. And then we are going to go ahead and shuffle that list and then return whichever one ends up in first place. Super. One final import. Why are you complaining? Oh, right. Instead of a supply of strings, we're going to be a supply of movies. Okay, so now we're going to return a random movie every time. I'm going to go ahead and run this. See if it boots. Should be fine. Yes, okay, so now, of course, we need to also modify the processor. because string to uppercase is boring. I'm going to copy paste the movie class because I'm lazy. And oh wait, the CTO is still in the webinar. I shouldn't have said that. We have
I am
a
here.
movie. Yeah, you're here. You didn't hear that, did you, Matt?
Remind me that during the performance review.
All right, we're going to filter by rating. And you know, it needs to be at least a 6 in order for it to be considered a good movie. And we're also going to do some data manipulation. And in my experience, people generally undervalue Batman movies. So we're going to correct this flaw in humanity by changing the rating for movies that contain the string Batman in their name. So if the name contains Batman, we're going to make a new movie with the same name, but with a rating multiplied by 2. Otherwise, you know, just return movie. Okay, that's good. Now in our bean, why are you there? Okay, we're going to return, movie. Corrected movie is, first we apply the Batman factor, of course, before we do the filtering. And then if filter by rating for corrected movie, we return the actual corrected movie, otherwise we return nothing. And returning null in this case will mean that the that it won't output any message. It won't output the string null or anything weird. We're gonna run this. Yeah, kill the previous one, thank you.
While we're waiting, maybe you can answer the question that Kasia asked, the Kafka image that you are using. And I think you can show
that
it
is
in
a
the phone
good
now.
one. I'm actually using the, it's a weird name, the Wurstmeister Docker Compose setup for Apache Kafka. I'm not quite sure which version is in there. I'm going to go ahead and answer that question to you later once Rob is talking. I'll answer it in the webinar, GoToWebinar tool. In the meantime, the processor is running. And I'm going to look at the consumer. Ah, excellent. So we have 2 movies coming in. Batman Begins rated 14. Remember, we gave it a rating of 7, but we applied the very important Batman factor. And the same goes for Lego Batman. What I don't see is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, because it's just not good enough to make the list. So what I want to show here specifically is that Spring Cloud Stream makes it very easy to automatically serialize and deserialize your data. Nowhere did I specify how to turn a movie into a JSON string, but because JSON is the default content type and you get your deserializers and serializers for free, everything just kind of works from the start. Of course, if you want to change things and do, I don't know, XML or even Avro or JSON schemas or proto buffer, you can, but you don't have to if you want to keep it simple. So I'm actually a big fan of that. There is one last thing that I promised I would show you, and that's to make everything reactive. Now, after I show that, there's going to be a bit of a poll where you can vote on which other subjects you want me to show, and I'll pick well, as many as I can fit in my time. And after that, it's Rob's turn. So we're going to make this reactive. Now, it's pretty simple because we turn this into a flux and this into a flux. I'm going to go ahead and import this. So this comes from Project Reactor. And instead of this whole clutter right here, we're just going to say, well, I have a flux. I'm going to map it on my Batman factor method, and I'm going to filter it on my filter method. And then instead of these, I don't know, 8 or so lines, I have exactly 1. I'll restart my application. While it's restarting, answering another quick question. Did you set an interval somewhere how fast information is shared between the microservices? The answer to your question is no, I didn't. There is, once again, a default value, which works pretty well in this case. You can set an interval value if you want. Usually you wouldn't periodically output data like this, but it's all customizable. The default value is like a second or something. Now the processor is running again, and what I really want to see is that consumer still works the same way that it did. Yeah, hey, there we go. Everything is still running smoothly. So if you want to make your application reactive, this is what you need to do. Instead of having a function that turns a movie into movie, you have a function that turns a flux of a movie into a flux of a movie. It's pretty simple, and it has a few advantages. One is, as you can see, it's a lot less code to do it reactively. Two, if you make your application reactive, it'll be a lot better at handling I/O. Like if you're doing database communication or HTTP calls, it'll just be a lot better at multitasking. And three, if you have everything reactive, the next time you are at a seminar or a reception or something, you too can be part of the cool kids club and be 100% buzzword compliant, which is also important for some people. Now, I'm going to launch the poll next. I see a lot of questions coming in. That's really nice. I'm going to answer a lot more of them, but not right now because I really want to get to this poll. I'm going to launch it, and you should now be able to see this. And I'm going to go through all of the options. So function composition is a way to define your beans and the way that you link functions together using your configuration. From HTTP to Kafka is, I think, very interesting because it shows you a use case which I think is very common, where you have an incoming HTTP call, and based on that, you want to put a message on Kafka or whatever you're using. RabbitMQ as an alternative to Kafka. If you do pick that one, I'm actually going to mix them up. Multiple inputs, outputs. If you want your service to read from, for example, 2 Kafka topics or write to 2 Kafka topics, I can show you how to do that as well. And then we have input validation. So let's see, what's our percentage of votes? Okay, it's still climbing, very good. Let's see some questions. No annotation is required to mark an application producer or consumer. That is correct. In fact, your application can be a consumer 3 times and a producer 2 times. Everything is very flexible. Another question. So just by defining topics and properties files, it works as producer or consumer. Yes. Third question. When did the supplier bean get invoked? I think I've missed that part. Well, you didn't miss that part because I didn't show that part, because that's all done underwater by Spring. If you define a bean in your application, which is either a supplier, a function, or a consumer, then Spring will invoke it for you, which is really nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll here. I have a lot of votes for RabbitMQ and from HTTP to Kafka. Let me check. I have 6 minutes. Okay, so I think I can do those two. There were also a lot of votes for multiple inputs, outputs. Unfortunately, that takes a little bit more time, so I don't think I have enough time to show that. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to go from HTTP to Kafka first, because that's what most people voted for. And as usual, with Spring, the first thing you do is add some dependency. So we're going to do that. And in this case, we need, and I wrote this down, Spring Boot Starter Web. This one. Yes. Press the reload button. Okay. And we are going to add our controller annotation. Obviously, normally you want to dump everything in your application class. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to do it that way right now. And we're going to make a post mapping, which is going to be /movies. And it's called response status. Yep. Import this thing, Hide send. I'm just going to call it send, and our request body is going to be movie. Yep. We need an stream bridge for this, which you can just auto wire. Import this thing, import all the things. And we're going to go ahead and send our movie. First a topic. Okay, so I've created a post mapping with a regular REST controller that you would normally use. I've auto-wired a stream bridge, and now I'm basically saying, hey, put this thing on this topic. And I'll restart my application. Oh, so many questions. Yes, very good, guys. I'm going to answer as many as I can just with regular text. This thing is running. Let's see if our consumer still works. It's kind of important. Yep, still works. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and get our a little bit bigger. Thank you. Do an HTTP call to ourselves, to localhost on port 8080 / I think I called it /movies. Name is I don't know, Hello Kitty visits the zoo. And our rating will be I'm gonna go ahead and give that a 10 out of 10 because that sounds very interesting. Oh, there we go. Hello Kitty visits the zoo, rating 10. So that was real quick. How do you go from an HTTP request coming in to Apache Kafka? I hope that's clear. I have 3 minutes left. So now we're going to add RabbitMQ, and that's actually a little bit more complicated. So once again, start with adding dependencies. We have our demo consumer. And in our POM, I'm going to go ahead and remove the Apache Kafka dependencies because we don't need, Spring Cloud Stream, we need to keep. Remove the Apache Kafka dependencies and add a dependency for, and I wrote this down as well because it's hard to remember all of them. Spring Cloud Stream binder Rabbit. That's this one. Super. Okay, so we've changed our dependency from the Kafka binder, this one, to the Rabbit binder. And for the consumer, that's all we need to do. So I'm going to fire it back up. Yes. Okay, so this running, it's not reading anything because RabbitMQ isn't receiving any messages. So we're going to take our processor and add the same dependency here. Spring Cloud Stream binder Rabbit. Add it. Reload my dependencies. And now what I need to do is be a little bit careful because this now needs to say, well, my binder is Kafka, but my output will be Rabbit. So what are we doing here? I'm explicitly defining the binders for my bindings. So it's going to read, the in is going to read from Kafka, and the out is going to write to Rabbit. For those of you who know RabbitMQ and wondering, oh, where are all of your exchanges and bindings and queues? I don't know, the defaults take care of everything. I can tell you the details, but I don't think it's that important right now. I'm going to go ahead and run this. By the way, I have RabbitMQ running in a Docker image as well, because I came prepared. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, it's connected. Now let's see our consumer to see if everything still works. Yes, excellent. So with that, I hope you realize how unbelievably easy it can be to switch or even combine Kafka, RabbitMQ, and other message brokers. Because Spring really makes it easy for you. I hope I didn't go too fast. And I think it's about time for Rob's part of the presentation because, oh yeah, 8 o'clock exactly. Fantastic. Rob, are you ready?
Perfect timing. Yeah, let me just maximize this on my screen.
Yeah, let's see if there's...
I have to click on, let's see, sharing, change presenter.
Or you're just going to take over just like that?
I'm just going to take over just like that. It's the people's operating. Because the people want to test.
Yeah, that is so. It's also kind of important, especially when I'm writing the code. Excellent.
If I'm correct, you should now be seeing my Just Eat takeaway slide. Yes.
I believe that is the case. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide my camera and yeah, take it away, Rob.
Thanks, David. Thanks for this brilliant introduction to Spring Cloud Stream. But as you all know, unfortunately, or maybe just the way it is, developing is only part of it, because to assure that we have very good software, we also want to test it. And that forces us to think more about what we are building and take the quality into consideration. And also when we make changes, we can immediately find out if those changes are breaking our software or if everything is still running as we expected. So what I want to talk about today, first I will give you a small overview of the system under test. I will build further on what David showed you, but zoom in a bit on the processor. I will first show you how to test it using just regular Spring Cloud Stream. Then I will show you how to rapidly make a whole lot of tests using parameterized testing. And after that, I also want to show you how to do it in a reactive way. So those beautiful fluxes that David showed you, how can we test that? Because it's different from testing in the regular way. And last but not least, if there is time, I want to show you how to go about doing an integration test using Spring Cloud Stream so that we can test the entire thing. Now, the system under test that we're going to look at is the processor, and I already prepared one. And it listens to the topic Kafka topic movie, where movies just like David showed are coming along with a name and a rating. Now this processor is doing four things. First of all, whatever's coming in, it's going to log that so that we can see what's happening. Then it's going to add a description based on the name. So it's going to check the name and add a new field to it called description. So the movies that are going to come out of this are going to be a little bit different because they're going to have an extra field. Then they're going to filter all movies out that are below a set rating, similar to what David showed, and then we're going to log what comes out and then put it on the Kafka topic, good movies. So that's what we're going to be showing today. Now let me just get rid of this and put this in presentation mode so that we can see what I'm typing. And want to add also this. So here we have that movie that David talked about, and we have some yellow bars because a lot of the functions that are in there are not being used by my program. But the only thing that's basically changed is that we now also have a description in there. Now I have split up all my functions into separate classes. So I will first show you the logging. It's going to be very simple functions, a function that logs all things that are incoming. And writes them to a log using SLF4J, which is a logging framework that you can easily include, and then pass the movie along. And at the end of it, it's going to do the same thing, only it's going to be the outgoing message that gets logged. Now, the other functions are a bit more interesting. I have a function to describe the movie, and what that's going to do is check the movie, see if it is a Batman movie, and if it is, it's going to add a description. Hey, it's a movie about Batman. And if it's not, then it's going to add this description, some boring movie, because it probably is.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I wanted to. I saw the poster hanging behind you. I wanted to hook into your love for Batman. Now, how do we define that it is a Batman movie? Well, we get that from the properties that we can get from the environment, and I will show you in a little bit how we get those properties. But those properties are basically being passed in as an array of strings, and what I just did is put in some strings that I am sure that are in any Batman movie title, so either the name Batman or Dark Knight. And I think that covers basically all the good Batman movies. So this is going to add a description to it. And the other function we have is the filtering function, and that's pretty simple. That just checks the movie, gets the rating, and compares that to the property get rating. And that's also something we get from the environment. And I'm going to show you. David showed you application.properties. Spring Boot also works with application.yaml, which is basically the same kind of thing, only it looks a little bit different because then you have this indentation. So first I will talk about these properties here. We can see what I'm passing in is for our function filter rating is 3. So all the movies that are 3 or higher will get passed on and the rest will get filtered out. And here we have the titles that I want to add a description for. Now, the stuff that is above here is also very interesting, because that's a pretty cool feature of Spring Cloud Stream when you're using functions, is that you can pipe them together. We see here in the definition, we see log incoming, describe movie, filter, and log outgoing with pipe symbols in between. And we could alter the order of that, or we can add even more functions in between. And in this way, we can very easily add a lot of very simple functions together to create pretty complex behavior. The downside of that is that for your bindings, you also have to use those function definitions. So we get quite a long name for our binding. It's now a log incoming, describe movie, filter, log outgoing in one for that Kafka movie topic. But still, yeah, for me at least, this has a lot of advantages. Now we want to test this. So I'm going to go back to my filter function, and that property is being read in by a configuration property class that's then being passed into the function itself. We want to test this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a test to it, create a test. Well, all these default values are perfectly fine. So we're just going to create that test. And when I am going to test this, what I actually want to do is not spin up the entire Spring Boot framework every time I test this function, because that takes a lot of time. And I want to add a lot of tests, and I don't want to have you around waiting all day for all these tests to finish. So I'm going to add some mocks to it with Mockito, which is a framework for adding basically dummy classes that just pretend that like they're the actual class, but they are not. So we don't have to run everything. So I'm going to do add mock that automatically creates a mock. We're going to do that for the filter function properties. For the second one, then I'm going to call that properties. And I'm going to inject that into another mock. I use the add inject mocks. And what that's going to do, that's going to spin up an actual instance of my filter functions class, which contains that filter that you saw. And inject the mock that I defined above it into that class. And last but not least, because it's a mock, it has no actual functionality, so we need to define it there. And just to save a little bit of time, I put something in the notepad that I can quickly copy paste in here. That's a before each function. So before each test, what are we going to do? We don't want to review the edit imports. What do we want to do? We want to make sure that when properties gets called, that it returns a rating of 3, so that we will filter on things that have a rating of 3. And if you want to run this mocking framework, we have to extend this class. So normally we would extend it with Spring Boot runner class, but now we're going to do Mockito extension, and I can see it's there already. .class. So this is our testing framework, and now we are all set up to start adding our tests. So let's add a very simple test. We want to make sure that good movies are not filtered out. So I'm going to add a test. Oh, let's start on a new line. Void good movie is not filtered out. Well, what is that going to look like? First of all, we want to have a movie that we can compare to. So I'm going to just add a movie in here. It's going to be a new movie. And David, maybe you can help me out here. What's the title of a good movie?
A good movie, Inception, is awesome.
Inception. All right. It's not a movie about Batman, but it is a pretty cool movie. What score are we going to give it?
Can I also get Lord of the Rings, please?
Lord of the Rings?
Okay, so give Inception
I will
a
use
9
that in the next test.
A next test, okay.
Okay, I'll put an 8 for Inception, and I need to import this, of course. Yes, import the class. So now we have a movie to check out, and we want to assert that it gets passed. So we use assert that. We also need to import it. So I'm going to import that static method from assert j. All right. And what we want to do there is we want to go to our functions and then our dot filter, and we want to pass along that mock that we made with the properties, so that when we filter, it gets the properties from there. And what we want to do there is we want to apply it. Start it on a new line. Apply that to our movie. And that should be equal to that same movie, because it should just be passed along. So we're not doing anything fancy, we're just checking if it's going to get passed along. So now I'm going to run this test and hope that I did everything correctly. And we can see that, yay, our test passed. So indeed, this good movie is not being filtered out. Well, as you can see, we're testing now for a movie with a rating of 8. There's a lot of other cases where a movie should not be filtered out. At least 3 should not be filtered out. Maybe 10 should not be filtered out as well. We want to test all of that. And we're going to get very tired if we have to make a test method like this for every single instance that we want to test, for every single value that parameter can get. So I'm just going to copy this test and I'm going to change it a bit into a different test, because I'm going to say, no, we want not a regular test, we want a parameterized test. Yes, that one. Oh, and then we get rid of this test word. Okay, and we're going to rename it, because otherwise we get into trouble with the other. And this test is going to say, okay, I pass when the rating is high enough. Very creative test names. So since it's a parameterized test, we want to add a parameter to our method. It's going to be the rating. And so we're not going to define it here. We're going to say the rating comes from the environment, and I'm going to make Mert happy, Lord of the Rings. Our parameterized test, of course, needs a value source. And there are multiple ways in which you can add values to this. We are first going to demonstrate the most basic way to do that, which is actually called a value source. And what I'm going to pass into there is an array of integers. We call it ints. And I'm just going to create an array containing, well, 3 is an interesting value to test. 10 will probably be an interesting value to test. And since we have not created anything to constrain how high our values can go, I'm also going to add the biggest value we can get by adding integer max value. These should all be valid ratings that will get passed by our filter in the way it's currently programmed. So I can run it now. And now we can see that we have all of a sudden 3 tests running and being passed. Well, we see here in this output that it does not look very easily understandable. When I come back to this code 3 months later and I look at this test, I'm going to wonder, hey, what are these numbers here? So something that we can do, which is pretty cool, we can just add some simple logic that can name our parameters. So I just copy paste it in from my notepad because I'm not a very fast typer. What this is going to do, it's going to show by using this code the index of the test run, the index of the array that we're passing, and it's going to show the arguments that were passed. So when we run this test again, it's going to look a little bit more understandable. So we see it run number 1 with rating 3, rating 10, and rating very high. So that's a cool way to add a bit more functionality there. But as we can see, unfortunately, we are now only testing whether movies are passing when they're high enough. Actually, we would like a test where we can just test all kinds of movies in one go, so that we can add a lot of different parameters to the test. That's also possible. So I'm just going to copy this here to save us a lot of typing. And I'm going to say, okay, pass when rating is high enough, but filter when rating is low. And we're going to pass in a bunch more things here. I also want to pass in the name of the movie. And I want to pass in the result that we are expecting, which is a movie. Of course, we have to adjust our code here to reflect that change. So we're going to add the name here to our constructor, and we're going to say it should be equal to the result. Now, we don't want to have a value source here. We're going to use something else. It's called the CSV source. So I'm going to just remove this one. And CSV, you might know it from file names, stands for comma separated values. You can also make them in Excel. So we could read in a file here, but we can also define it here just manually, which is what I'm going to do, because then it shows a lot more easier what I'm going to pass in there. So I have also created this. This is what I want to pass in. What you see here, what I'm passing in is a string containing three things: the name of the movie, the rating of the movie, and a description of the movie that we expect as a result. And that could also be null. Now, as you see, I also have to add something else, which is I have to add a delimiter. And as you can see, I defined it as to be a colon. Delimiter is. Why is it not resolving this?
You're missing
I have not closed my array here. There we go. So now we're passing in these two kinds of movies, and we could indeed pass in a very long list of all kinds of possible combinations that we want to test, and we could even include in our result the different descriptions that we want, but that's for the integration test to do. So there is a little bit of magic in here that I'm going to explain in a moment. First, I'm going to run this to show you what it looks like when I run it. Because you're probably wondering, how does it know to create a movie from Batman Begins /8 or from null? Well, that's where I cheated a bit. Ahead of time, I created a factory method in the class movie, and a factory method is from, and that takes a string and checks if the string is null, then we should return an object null. And if it's an actual string, then we should split it on the slashes and create a new movie based on those values. Of course, it's not very pretty to add this code that is only important right now for our tests to our class itself. So we could also make it a static method in our class. But in this way, it automatically gets included by Spring Boot. Oh, I'm going to the wrong class. I need to go here. It magically gets included by Spring Boot by running our test. So that makes for a cleaner test. So that's also nice. If you need that from factory method anyway, then this is a cool way to use it. I want to show you something else because this is now not very readable with, and it's also not correct because it's not a rating. There's another way we can add this description to parameterized test. What a difficult word to say. We can also add the indexes of the array we are passing. So here we say, okay, index 0 is the name of the movie, index 1 is the rating, and index 2 is the description for the movie itself. So now when we run it, it's even more verbose, so to speak. Movie Batman Begins with rating 8 should be Batman Begins rating 8. Yeah, and it should be null. It's also correct. Let's see if there are any questions in the meantime. Could you show the Docker Compose file? I can show the Docker Compose file, sure. I have it right here. That's for the Apache Kafka. So what we're doing here is we're starting up a Zookeeper and a Kafka.
Rob, excuse me,
Yeah.
Rob. We can't see your Docker Compose.
It's on a different screen. Sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong window.
For the Kafka stuff, I also answered the question with a link to the Git repository that we use.
Oh, okay.
Or that I used at least. But go ahead.
Yeah, just to show it. There's a bunch of configuration you need to put in there that is not immediately obvious. I'm not going to go into everything here because that will take too long, and I want to show you more about testing. But that's what that looks like. So it's not all done by magic. You actually need to define some stuff. So now we have parameterized testing included for our non-reactive version of this processor, but I will also want to show you the reactive version of it. So we'll switch to a different thing that I have created. Here you see that function that David showed as a reactive version. So we are not using a function on movies, but on fluxes of movies. And basically, we're doing the same thing. We're only passing it along if it gets the right rating. Now, I think I already prepared a test class here. So yeah, so that I don't need to retype everything. So all that injecting the mocks, everything is already there. Now we're going to add a test. And let me just click this away because I opened that Docker file and it's now blocking my view of the questions. There we go. Nothing new yet. Okay. So we're going to add a new test, and this is going to be a reactive test. And then we're going to say, okay, good movies should not be filtered out. Not, damn it, filtered out. Typing is hard. Filter it out. It sounds like I'm doing something with a fish. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a text flux, a flux of movie. And when we want to construct that flux, we can use flux.just. That will just create a flux. And we're going to create that from a new movie. And it should be a good movie. So let's go to the movie that started it all, just the first Batman, and with a rating of 7 or something like that. It was a fun movie, but not the greatest ever. Okay. And we also want to see what our result will look like. And for that, we want to apply our filter function. So we're going to make a flux of movie again. And we're going to call that our result flux. And we're going to do our functions.filter with properties and then apply that to our test flux. Hey, get away there. Okay. Since it's a flux, which is basically a stream until it's being blocked, we need to we cannot use the assert method because it will not work with that. We need to use a step verifier so that we can force it to go to the next step. So we create a step verifier from that result flux. And we say, okay, we should then expect the next one to look like, well, actually look exactly like this. Oh, this zoomed in view is very hard to type. And since it's a flux, we cannot just leave it at that. We need to verify that it's complete, and then we're done. So this will, we'll run it. This will test whether it actually gets passed on. Yes, great success. So this is the reactive way of testing. We need to use the step verifier and verify complete, otherwise it will not work. We can, of course, also test whether it's a null result. Then we will say just, we can change this, say, okay, we can use a very bad movie, so it's not going to pass, scary movie. a very bad movie, if I remember correctly. I saw it very long ago and I was very disappointed. Then we should actually not expect a movie to come out. And we should not expect the next one. It should just be done. So, yeah. So in the case where we want to test if it's actually filtered out, this will also pass because now it's actually being filtered out. So this is the reactive way of testing. And I have one more thing to show you, and then I'm going to see if I have some time to answer questions. So I'm going to switch back to the non-reactive version of my program. And what I want to show you is how to add integration testing. So we have now been testing single functions, which is all well and good, but we also want to see our entire application working. Well, I created something ahead of time. There's already 2 tests in there, tests that we are basically adding to all our microservices that we are building with Spring Boot. One is this one, which is a very strange test since it just loads the Spring context, and it does that because at the top we have here at Spring Boot test, that web environment I will get into in a minute, and that just tests whether Spring is able to start up without any issues. Well, we want to add always another test. We want to check if the health check of that service is up and running, because we have our services running in an orchestrated environment. And we want to be notified the second that the service is not healthy. So all our services have a health check. For that, there is a RESTful a web endpoint that just says up when you call it. For that, we need the web test client to approach that, and that's why we are here adding that web environment with a random port. But that's not the main thing we are interested in. We are interested in testing all of our functions in a row. So what I did here at the top, I already created some example messages. So these are JSONs, what an incoming message would look like and what an outgoing message should look like when we're done with it. And I'm going to add to that the integration test. Go here and I'm going to copy paste a very long string because otherwise it's going to take too long to type it. But I will explain exactly what that does. So I paste it in here. All right, what does this do? This is also that test that the good movie should not be filtered. So what are we going to do? We are first creating a new configurable application context, and we're going to load that with our own application, our movie filter application, by using the Spring Application Builder to bind that to a test channel configuration that we get from our movie filter application. And we're just going to run it with the arguments that I showed you that are also in the YAML, which you can also put in the properties files, that we want to test all these functions that we have in our class. So this is a try with resources, and in order to run that, we need to first define an input destination for a source. Oh, okay. Destination source, and what we want to do is get from our context. We want to get the bean. That is all about input destination dot class. So now we have our input configured. We want to also configure our output. The second one here, and let's call that target. And we also get that from the context. And we want to do the output destination dot class. Now, what we're going to do, this basically runs our entire Spring Boot applications and binds our inputs and outputs to source and target. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to source and say, okay, we should just send that message that I created there. Just going to send a new generic message. And it's going to be that incoming message JSON that I showed you that's at the top of my class. And we want to assert there that what we get there is going to be a new string. Typo, go back. Oh, my system is suddenly become very slow. Target dot receive get reload. And we want to make sure that that is equal to the outgoing message that we defined up there. And I still have to add in a semicolon here. So this basically spins up the entire application context, binds a source and target to the inputs and outputs of our application, and then we can just put in a message and check that the outgoing message is correct. And I still have an error. I have an extra. I need to close something off, I think. Yeah, that's it. So let's run this. Oh yeah, that's that could not auto wire for the web test client. That's something that IntelliJ does. That's, yeah, you can get rid of it, but it's very complicated. So I just decided to live with it because it doesn't block me. And we see that this test works as well. So that's in a nutshell how you can rapidly set up a bunch of tests for your Spring Cloud Stream function framework. So let's see how much time we got left. I'm a little bit over time, so I don't know if we have time for questions. For integration tests for Kafka, can we support in-memory Kafka cluster? Yes, you can. You can actually create with a test container. You could create even a Docker inside your that gets called from inside your application. But you can also use embedded Kafka to test. I hope that answers your question there. David, do you see any other interesting questions that we should answer before we run out of time here?
Have you worked with test containers for integration tests? That's actually an interesting one.
I personally have not actually used it for testing something I have built. I have been playing around with it, but I believe you have a lot of experience with that, David. Is that correct? Yeah,
my team's been using them for a while, and yeah, they are actually very nice. It does take some setup, but yeah, we wanted to also show that in this webinar, but it's just too much to show. So yeah, maybe next time.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we can make a nice blog post or something about it for the future. Would have to talk to Mert.
Could also be cool.
I saw also the question if this stream will be put up on YouTube. Mert, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, we can try.
Sorry, what did you say?
Putting this to a YouTube channel, right? The stream.
Yeah, we are also able to send the recording to everyone who attended, so no worries.
Okay.
Can you do integration testing of these microservices with Postman? Yes, you could. You could add a RESTful endpoint where you can send messages. But for connecting from Kafka to Kafka, of course, Postman is not a very good solution. I also have something that is a very lightweight program called Kafka Tool, where you can quickly try out some stuff. But for actual integration testing, it's better to use the test containers, I think. Instead of CSV, can you also use XML or JSON files as source? I actually am not sure.
Actually, can't you see the answers, Rob? Because I answered that one already.
Oh, you answered them. No, I cannot see the
You need
answer.
to make the window a little wider.
Yeah. I'm on a Mac and I cannot resize it. Go to webinar control panel. So.
Yeah, it's not currently supported. I think I'm not sure if they plan on doing it either.
Yeah, for now it's only CSV files, as far as I know. At least. Anything else that we need to answer? I think that we have answered most of them, right?
Yeah, there's a few more like Kafka streams with protobuf. I think there is support for protobuf. I'm not sure how mature it is. And another question, how has your team been using Spring for a long time? How does your team adopt new technology tools? That is a question that I can give you a very long answer for. We've been using Spring for over a year now, a year and a half, I think, maybe. And how do we adopt new technologies / tools? Very carefully, because you can waste a lot of time by doing it. But we do try to embrace new technologies because you can't stay still. Plus, software developers like new toys.
Yeah, and my experience, because I only started working with Spring about a year ago, and my experience is it's so easy to learn. It's very quick to pick up and get some really cool results because the defaults are just that good. And once you start using it, then the learning curve can go on for quite some while because you're constantly discovering cool new things that you can do in an even better way than you did previously. But to start using it for the first time is actually pretty doable.
I think with that we're gonna put a tail on this, Rob.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I want to thank everyone for coming and for everyone for joining. It was a lot of fun to do. I hope you guys were also entertained and that you learned something. And hopefully we're going to do this again. If you don't remember everything, that's okay. Just try to remember that both Spring Cloud Stream and Junit5 allow you to make things very easy for yourself. And go watch the Lego Batman movie because apparently it's very good.
It's very good. Yeah, thanks everybody. It was a lot of fun doing this, and yeah, hope to do it again sometime. And let's see if we can do a follow-up by sharing something of what we showed here.
All right.
Bye-bye.